Hey there, I'm Ginni Saraswati, founder and CEO of Ginni Media and host of The Ginni Show, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi everyone. On this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we share a conversation with journalist, podcaster, and entrepreneur Ginni Saraswati. Stay tuned. First off, thank you all once again for listening and watching Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, and for sharing this with your friends and family. Your support reminds everyone that conversation is the antidote to apathy, and if you're enjoying these, please follow and subscribe and share a kind rating, and submit a review wherever you might be getting this right now. I genuinely appreciate you and everyone for listening. Now, we've been together sharing conversations for almost 4 years now with people from every walk of life in our global community, but it's been rare to share a conversation with other podcasters. While I wear a few different professional and personal hats, living in the podcasting and media lanes have been a growth process for me, and one that has been as much about learning the overall business as it has been about psychology and harmony and seeking passion in life. So it was certainly wonderful to share a conversation with a true pro and a terrific human in podcaster and entrepreneur Ginni Saraswati, the founder and CEO of Ginni Media and an award-winning journalist. Ginni was born in Sri Lanka and grew up both personally and professionally in Australia, where her experiences had her working for one of the only international LGBT radio stations, becoming an award-winning journalist, and hosting an award-nominated podcast. She eventually came to her now natural home in New York City and started her own company in Ginni Media, hosting a full podcast production house filled with eclectic shows on culture, health, women entrepreneurs, lifestyle, and much, much more. Ginni herself hosts her own podcast, The Ginni Show, that features thoughtful expert conversations with leaders and changemakers about their journeys and the choices and risks both taken and not taken along the way, which have made Ginni a much sought-after thought expert. She's also been an outspoken voice in the LGBTQ+ community and a role model for queer entrepreneurs and aspiring leaders. We caught up recently to chat about a broad range of things, from narrating and curating the stories of others to the weight or lightness of our identities, and we even found a way to weave in Jalen Brunson from the Knicks. Go Lakers, by the way. But we started by talking about an even more important topic, as I asked her how things were going as she and her wife-to-be are deep in the middle of wedding planning.
You're the first person to actually ask me about this question specifically, because being engaged, we've been engaged for nearly a year now, but We're getting married in a couple of months. So the wedding planning's lovely. We both said to each other that we're going to go into this and not let stress get to us. Obviously, that doesn't turn out that way,
Right,
let's be frank. I think for me, the most, and I would probably speak for my fiance as well, the most stressful part for us has been not actually the wedding, not getting married or the finances or anything like that per se. It's been the things that come up from childhood, right? It's a big event in your life, and then everything that you have unresolved in your childhood, where big events happened and people didn't show up, that stuff comes up. I'm like, oh God, gotta unpack this in therapy today.
I was just going to say, it's sort of like ongoing, wedding planning plus therapy plus a lot of hand holding, but fortunately you have each other, which is good.
Exactly. So it's all exciting. We're very excited, and we're having a small wedding, but it's a lot of people are flying in for it. So it's going to be a very international, interstate wedding.
You never know. You could probably somehow combine your wedding with like a Knicks game and do like Madison Square Garden style,
I would love that, but I think we would also be the first brides yelling obscenely at the court too. We wouldn't be the graceful brides at MSG, I mean.
Well, there's always first, right?
Exactly.
I've been thinking and reflecting a little bit about who you are, what you do, and in sort of this universe of storytelling, when you're trying to share a little bit about yourself, but also share the unique story of others, how much of yourself actually comes through in helping narrate the work of others?
That's a really, really unique question, Abe. I've never actually been asked that before. I think a lot of things that get overlooked nowadays at the speed of which information is moving is just what we talked about before we started hitting record, is that power of listening.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an underrated skill nowadays. The ability to pause, to actually listen, to take in and connect. Because at the speed that even our youth, the way that they're going, the speed that they're processing information and then moving on to the next thing, that pause time, that time to actually let things sit, to feel it, it's missing. Or it's missing or not being encouraged, or it's just not in their kind of day-to-day practice. It's not how they're conditioned, right? So when I'm, with someone, if I'm talking to them, if I'm interviewing them, if I'm having a conversation with them, I like to treat it just as that. It's a conversation. It's like that movie Hitch. Have you seen that
Oh
movie Hitch
yeah.
with Will Smith?
Love that.
How he's like a consultant and he tells Kevin James, you need to listen. You need to hear what she has to say, listen and respond. That's pretty much it, right? When
Do
you
you get to do the
people.
dance too? You're right here.
Look, I
You're
am
right
just
here.
as good as a dancer as Kevin James is, just right here. And I'll do the spin too, but no,
There
I
you
don't
go.
want to knock everything.
No, but you're so right, right? You're basically coaching a lot. And
Yeah.
but it takes a lot of your own, I think, skill, and in a way, like you said, a lot of the unpacking and a lot of your own background and experience and expertise to both listen and know when to jump in and know when to steer somebody. Have you had any experiences where the ability to help narrate somebody else's story is just so resonating or so conflicting with yours that it's just like, wow, there's a real churn there, and it takes a lot of energy, in fact, to find a way to coach responsibly.
Yeah. I hear what you it's one of those things where you speak to different people, and you would have this too as a podcast host, right? You speak to different people from all over the world, all different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And to find that connection point sometimes can be more difficult than others, right? It's like you and I have absolutely nothing in common on paper.
Right.
But I always go back to this thing where when I moved to New York, I was training at this gym, and this guy said to me, we were talking about the very thing. It's like, look at you, you're from Sri Lanka, you were raised in Australia, you're here in New York, and we're having this conversation. Isn't this cool? I'm like, yeah, actually that is really cool, because
Yeah.
very unique kind of interchange, right? And what we kind of came down to was like two common points with people that you have in common, right? And sometimes this can unpack things for good, or it could turn into a therapy session, or it could be a lot of fun, right?
Right.
You ask two questions if you have absolutely nothing in common, or you think you have absolutely nothing in common. One, do you love your mother? Now, this can go either way. This is a question where it can go left or right. You could be there for a while, or it could be quite quick. Or do you like food? One of those two things you'll get a yes for, and that's where you make that connection point, right? And then that's the part where you start connecting. So have I been in a situation where most people who I have spoken to, I go there if I absolutely have nothing in common,
Right.
but I find something in them, because at the end of the day, that person, that human that you're speaking to, they're on a platform where they're being seen and heard. And it sounds so simple, right? They're media trained, they're on a microphone.
Yeah.
But there is some part of them at some stage in their life where that was really scary for whatever reason, right? So being present, being there, and to what we were saying before, being able to actually hear what they have to say, that's what's so important, right? That's where you build the connection point. When I was in radio, though, one time, there was this guest that we had. I remember there was three of us interviewing her.
Yeah.
She gave us nothing, and she kind of then took control of the interview. I'm like, whoa, okay, this is kind of, I just kind of shut down then. And that was the most challenging interview I've done. I was also very young in my journalist career. It was like probably year 1 or 2. Now I'd probably again find the connection point in her or something with her or something like that. But at that point, I'm like, yo, I'm done. You take the wheel.
I was gonna say, even mom and any sort of food couldn't bring that one out, right?
No.
Yeah.
I think I'd be like, you go take your food to go. I'd probably say.
Yeah, exactly. Here's your brown bag and get lost.
Exactly.
And even with that, I love that whole idea that, like, something, people have something in common, or something to lubricate even just like the initial great that might be there. But even with your own background, right? You're Sri Lankan, you're an Aussie, you're an American, you're a person of color, you're a female founder, you're a CEO, you're part of the LGBTQ community. The idea of being with all of these labels of identity and proud labels of identity, does that ever feel like it's in fact a burden? Or is your portfolio constantly evolving enough that it feels light and airy? And yeah, I'm just kind of, these are all identity pieces that I'm collecting, and
Yeah.
they keep growing on me.
I think the way I would look at that or answer that, Abe, is some of those identities and labels are heavier than others,
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Some of them are very kind of, they're on the trajectory of always I think they're all evolving to an extent, but some of them evolve quicker than others.
yeah,
The part about the LGBT label was probably the biggest one that took to evolve. The person of color, even the entrepreneur label at the beginning had some, baggage to unpack or that sort
sure.
of stuff. But I think what I really like about having these different backgrounds, knowing different people, being able to connect with different people from different cultures is that very fact that I've been able to really look for the connection point, right? You meet people from Australia who I wouldn't have met if I grew up in Sri Lanka, right? I'm Sri Lankan. How do I connect with someone who's from a completely different background to I am? Same when I moved here, I'm like, here we go again in my 30s, right?
Right.
So I think some of those labels are heavier than others because there's a lot more conditioning I have to unlearn. And that's where it becomes heavier, I would say.
Yeah.
Whereas the entrepreneur path, you create that as you go. So you're learning new things constantly. You're not really having to, well, you do have to unlearn some things, but like you're more so learning and evolving at a greater speed than the other labels.
I love how you say that, because there is this, some are heavier than others. Some actually evolve in a much more kind of like the layer on top gets easier to either strip away, or it gets thicker because you can actually shield the things from the outside that much better.
Exactly.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, let's come back to our conversation with Ginni Saraswati. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi everyone, this is Chef Vikas Khanna. I am a chef, I am an author, filmmaker, documentarian, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hello everyone, my name is Tam France.
Hey, this is Nimesh Patel.
Hi, my name is Richa Morjani.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with Ginni Saraswati. When you've had to sort of like think about the flowing nature of this, and now also be a storyteller, be somebody in media, is it also important to shield yourself from unearthing those all the time? And, sort of, make sure that your boundaries are very, very distinct, and that you're able to outline that and create space for it, as protected space, if you will.
Yeah, that's what you just mentioned there, boundaries. That's the biggest lesson that I have learned and am still learning.
Yeah.
As a brown person, where are the boundaries? Like,
right.
You're not taught that, or at least in the way I grew up. Everything is about what you can do to make other people feel comfortable, other people feel served, other people feel okay. And there are some endearing parts of that, I think, and that's something that I've learned to embrace about brown culture. But It also comes with this people-pleasing gene, especially I've seen a lot of the women in brown culture too. And that is a part where you don't get that practice, or you don't get the reps in where you're okay with the discomfort of maybe not pleasing someone.
Yeah.
It's a very uncomfortable space to be in when you first start to kind of look after yourself, do self-care, and saying no to things. It's very uncomfortable because you are met with all of the things that you're taught as a kid, because you're taught as a kid, make sure you look good to other people, right? No matter what you do. And
Right.
then when you start saying no and letting people down, sitting with that is so uncomfortable.
Are you an oldest child?
No, I'm the youngest one.
You're- Yeah, and I mean, that's probably ubiquitous to any family dynamic as well. But you're absolutely right that there is that kind of like you have to keep yourself in check a little bit as you constantly are giving and giving and giving. Has that become easier as you, in fact, branch out that much more? Like you said, like you find common connections in unexpected places, but does that also allow you to let go of things and maybe liberate yourself from that kind of mentality of being boxed in and constantly giving and giving and giving, and maybe some of the exploration becomes the nourishment that you need?
Yeah, it does, Abe, and it also allows me to reflect on childhood patterns that I need to revisit, refine, and also really look at. Because, for example, the giving part, I think giving is a great thing, but the intention behind the giving, is it for approval or is it because you actually want to provide value? Because if it's for approval, down the track you feel resentment. And now that I've gone through that cycle of awareness, I'm like, my intention isn't there, so I'm not going to do that. That's the boundary that I have. And it's telling, right? So I think it's practice, it's messy, but it's also really important to sit in that discomfort of, I'm going to be disappointing some people today.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, the messy middle, as people like to call, right?
Yeah, exactly. The messy middle.
You're a veteran storyteller and a podcaster, so I'm just dying to hear what you have to say about this one. But what do you think is the biggest myth that you feel people, whether they're strangers or whether people you know really well, what do you think is the biggest myth that people have about podcasting and maybe even just media in general?
The biggest myth I hear every day is, how hard can it be to talk for a living every day and get paid for it?
Yeah.
Biggest myth I've heard, because it is a myth, because it's not just talking every day in front of a microphone or a camera, but there's lots of groundwork that go behind that people don't see, right? The consistency you have to put, Abe, into showing up on Riverside, doing your prep, having this, putting it up on all the Apple, Spotify, to do that at a consistent rate, it's hard, which is why not many people podcast or have a media outlet consistently. It's hard. It takes sometimes a village to run. So that's the biggest myth that I find. And I also find that, the saying, if they're not on the field, if they're in the stands, you've just got to make sure that you pay attention to those on the field. Don't pay attention to the Knicks fans in the bleachers like me, right? You pay attention to Jalen Brunson. That's what you have to do when it comes to that mentality as well.
Right. Well, there's that's a great point, because there's a discipline involved. First off, yes, I 100% I'm cheering in my head right now to everything you just said. But you're right? There's a discipline, there's a craft that's involved. And everyone, when you're in the stands, you see Jalen Brunson go in for a dunk and you're like, oh my God, like the guy's huge, he's great, he's talented. How hard could it be? He just rolls in to practice, or a game, and just does his thing. And there's just so much that goes into it beyond that. On top of that, was that your impression when you first started also?
No, actually, I started when I was 20 and I had some theater experience. So I knew, getting up on stage, I knew that mentality of being evaluated on that 1 hour of performance that you gave. And I knew that there was so much more that went behind it. So I knew from a young age that for media, that's not the case. But then obviously you forget that when you step into MSG, your critical self comes on and you're like, ah! So in some parts, I swim in the sea of forgetfulness, and in the other parts of my life, I'm like, I totally get what's going on here.
Yeah, well, we love living with those blinders, right? I mean, there's never a shortage of that. Work like this, as you've already talked about here so elegantly, it does magnify many of the intersections and the blends that are both expected and even unexpected. And you touched on this a little bit, but what have you had to really unlearn about yourself to gain more trust and confidence in your work, but as a function of your past and present? Like engaging in the present, but but also, making sure that you're cognizant of your past. What have you had to maybe unlearn so that that trust can actually and confidence can really shine?
One thing that I used to subscribe to, this was pre-entrepreneur life, was that I am not a morning person. You won't see me up by 10 a.m. I won't be working out 5 days a week. I'm not disciplined enough.
Yeah.
This is how much I can earn, and that's it. So, all in essence, these are very specific examples, but the limiting beliefs that either you have been taught or passed down or have inherited in some way, right? I feel that I had to unlearn those things because when you grow up as an immigrant, especially, you move to a Western country, you graduate, you have a job, you've made it, right? You're on your way to getting your house or your kids or you married, what that dream is. But I had to also unlearn emotional things. Like I had to unlearn people pleasing, like, or be observant of my patterns of people pleasing, or be observant of when I was fawning too much, like thinking outside of my needs. And that's very difficult to do when you've been someone who is in that people pleasing pattern. You're like, oh, is this really about me or my need to please them? So that's something that I had to unlearn. And when I moved to New York, that's when I really dived into my business, learned about self-care. I had to unlearn self-care and learn self-care at the same time. And I think that's where I really was able to, I guess in a weird sense, reconnect with myself and the person I wanted to be, as opposed to this person who was floating through life and doing their thing, but knew that they wanted more at the same time.
Are you someone who really values change in that, you are actually crave it as a mechanism for restoration and peace?
I think change, it's inevitable, obviously.
Yeah.
I love the magic in the mundane and the foundational things. Like I love the routines and the habits. But you need those routines and habits to ground the change that's always happening. I don't think they can exist without the other. I think if you're constantly changing and there's new things always happening, the chaos, right?
Yeah.
Where are you going to ground that? You're just pretty much letting it control you. So the foundational things you have, your values, your routines, your habits, your beliefs, that's what brings a change in with a lot more grace than it would without it, I would say.
Yeah, bravery and grace, and a lot of that is kind of folded in there. But I'm imagining that comes with a lot of experience, and in some ways, how have you learned to take the experiences and that change? Does it also make you better at not getting too seduced by the highs and also not too down with the lows? Like, do you deal with failure and success any differently now?
That's a great question. Because I think for me, failure and success, they run parallel.
Yeah.
Right. Because the more you fail, the closer you are to succeeding because you know what not to do. And the more success you have, you failed more to get the success that you do. So you can't have one without the other.
Sure.
I encourage my team to run experiments and tests and their ideas through our process mill and be like, okay, let's just run it. Because at the speed that we're learning, the speed of or the iteration that cycle of iteration where we're like, we've done this, okay, let's do something else. We're growing and learning so quickly in these little exercises that over time our trajectory is a lot quicker to hitting a success rate. So when I started entrepreneurship, if I failed at something, gosh, end of the world. But now I'm like, this is good. We know what not to do.
Right.
Let's learn and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great because it offers a little bit more harmony and balance, and I guess harmony is a better word there because balance means that something's losing and something's winning. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, let's come back to our conversation with Ginni Saraswati. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians, so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, this is Vidya Balan, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit.
Hi, this is Farhan Akhtar.
Hi, I'm music recording artist Sid Sriram, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hi there, I'm Abhay Dandekar, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with Ginni Saraswati. In your eye, based upon the things that you do and all the kind of the journey so far, is there an aspiration and yet also a trap when you think of the word media mogul?
Yeah, there is. I think the aspiration is, you feel like you're acclaimed. You feel like you've got your Oscar or your Grammy or your, what do you call it, your Ambie award for podcasters, right? But then the other side is like, oh, they're old and they've been in media for so long, like back when TVs were black and white. I'm like, okay, I'm not that old.
Yeah.
But I think there is also this perceived resistance to anything new that's coming up, because media has evolved in the last 20 years, right? Like pre this thing, like we could only get media like pre the iPhone, we could only get media at a certain time when media told us we could get it.
Right.
But now we can get media whenever we want.
Yeah, it's a lot more democratized.
Exactly. A lot more short form, like long form content. So that's the interesting part. I feel that, media has evolved. And does media mogul now mean influencer? Like it's just an ever evolving span of, qualities that someone has. So yeah, sometimes it's a double-edged sword, but it's also a compliment.
Yeah. And I mean, with that, do you, I wouldn't say aspire, but also you want to make sure that you're avoiding the trappings. But is it important for you in your eyes to not just be a media mogul, but is being a South Asian media mogul of some import as well?
I think when I set out on my media journey, it was more so just being what feels right for me. And I knew that it didn't necessarily look like a traditional South Asian part. And I knew in one way that was important, one for me to be living the life and create the life that I want to have and to be happy in. And the other part I knew was important because, hey, I can't mess this up because it hasn't been done before.
Right.
But really the other part is there needs to be that kind of, I don't want to call it trailblazing, but there needs to be a sense of, hey, let's look at things this way in anything. It doesn't have to be about career per se, but in any way, even remote work. We were working 9 to 5 in the office. Let's have another way of working. Doesn't mean this way's wrong. It's just another way. And I think when people's minds are opened up, they're closer to experiencing a life that they actually connect with more, or they never knew that they wanted, or they're shown things about themselves that they never knew existed. Because when you're on autopilot as humans, you just keep doing the mill, right? But you switch something up there, something else comes about. So it wasn't necessarily being a South Asian person of influence, but it was more so like there is another way of being, living, working too, which I feel more resonant with.
Yeah. If you're constantly with tunnel vision, the periphery and all the sort of like grandeur of what's around you is being lost. And hopefully, whether the label is as a South Asian person, as a Sri Lankan, and all the other labels that are out there, the idea is that it just builds your brand. And I'm imagining that those little surprises that come along the way, are always really helpful too. We talked about this at least briefly, but there's a world of kind of fleeting attention and the digital dominance of AI that's, likely taking us over as we speak. But if that's all upon us, and given your experiences, what actually makes you optimistic going forward about not just storytelling, but the lasting kind of longitudinal human connections behind that?
I think AI has, and I think all technology to this point, to some extent, has not hidden humans away, but has exposed humans more for who they are.
Yeah.
Right. The reality TV existed before Instagram. We live reality TV every day on Instagram. We look at someone's life for 3 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever the story permits us, right? And we judge their entire persona based on that 10 seconds. We don't know what they do for the other, 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 50 seconds of their day. But that 10 seconds, they're showing us a plane or how glamorous their life is. that's how we judge them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think AI, in that sense, it's going to help us value human connection more, because it's going to get to a point where the loneliness epidemic, depression, that all comes from lack of human connection, right? Because as humans, we need that. I think it's going to do the opposite of it. It'll get to a point where we'll be like, okay, this is where we're at as humanity. We need to really look at the core values and the core needs of people here now. And the other part that's exciting about AI which is kind of the double-edged sword of AI, it is connecting people in a way to communicate more. So how do we use AI as a tool for connection as opposed to something that hinders connection? That's going to be the next challenge. I feel that's going to happen for humanity.
Well, whether it's using AI or not, I know that your storytelling and all the work you're doing is exciting, and it's attracting people and making it so compelling for so many to hear your stories and read and view and engage in all of your work. Ginni, what a treat to share a conversation. I feel like we could talk forever, and certainly lots and lots of questions, but we'll save that for another time. I hope we can host you again down the road.
Would love to. I'd love to have you on the Ginni Show too, Abe. We'll talk about that offline.
Awesome. Thanks so much again, Ginni. And please check out Ginni's podcast and others at ginnimedia.com. It's DNC Convention Week, it was Raksha Bandhan, and it's back to school for many here in the US, so hope all are faring well and living with health and peace. Again, if you're enjoying these, how about submitting a healthy and peaceful rating and review and passing the word along to your friends and family about Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.